Hello, everyone, and welcome back to People Jew Wanna Know podcast. I'm back with another episode of the Goy You Will Enjoy season featuring Destiny Albritton. Destiny is the Senior Director of Next Gen at Christians United for Israel, where she works to ensure the next generation of Christian support for Israel is strong. Named one of 18 American Zionist women you should know by Hadassah in 2024, and one of the top 25 young visionaries for 2023 by the Jerusalem Post, Destiny joins the team at CUFI after being the National Outreach Director at the Israel on Campus Coalition. She's led many advocacy missions to Israel for significant organizations like CUFI, JNF, in addition to the Israel on Campus Coalition's Geller International Fellowship mission to Israel and the UAE. Destiny has a substantial online presence as a Christian content creator and Zionist activist, with over 1 million followers on TikTok and over 25,000 subscriptions on YouTube, formerly hosting the Beyond Campus podcast. She holds a bachelor's in international studies with a focus in peace studies from the University of Missouri and a master's of arts in political science and political communication from Tel Aviv University. Destiny is well known and beloved by the Jewish Insta or Jinsta community, so I had quite a few folks nominate her for our season, and I really enjoyed speaking with her. Just to put it in perspective for you, CUFI is the largest pro-Israel organization in America with over 10 million members. Even AIPAC is only 5 million people. CUFI is a big, big deal, so I feel very privileged to bring Destiny on. In this episode, we learn about Destiny's story, how she developed a passion for Israel, and what her work supporting both Jewish and non-Jewish students entails. She also offers countless pieces of advice for us Jews on how to build bridges with non-Jewish people. Talking to Destiny just put me at peace. Her principled, clear take gives me hope that there are many other people that think like her. It's funny talking to her because she'll be like, psh, obviously supporting Israel is the right moral thing to do here. And it's actually really validating because I personally constantly feel like I have to be careful or be nuanced about what I have to say. And Destiny just gets it. She's certainly a lady Jew wanna know, and I can't wait for you to hear the conversation. Please enjoy this episode. Hello, Destiny. Welcome to People Jew Wanna Know podcast. What's going on today?
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to chat with you, learn a little bit more on what you're working on. So my first question is, tell us about yourself. What do you do and how did you get there?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm Destiny and I live in Columbia, Missouri. Born and raised here, not exactly known for its thriving, bustling Jewish or Israeli communities here. But flash forward to, at this point in my life, I am the Senior Director of Next Gen at Christians United for Israel. And I have the cool privilege and responsibility of overseeing all of our efforts to ensure the next generation of Christian leaders stand strong with Israel. So that is high school students. We have a very robust, comprehensive high school program that is college students, that is youth pastors and young adult pastors, providing them opportunities to learn about Israel and teach the people that they lead about Israel. And then we also have programs for people of influence, people who have social media followings that they use their platform for causes and to talk about important things. We also have programs for them and resources for them. And so you can imagine I'm, always like juggling something, like always on the go because, one, it is a huge role, but also I just feel the burden and the responsibility of making sure that the Jewish people have friends beyond the Jewish community, in the Christian community, at every age group, adults now and also 15, 20 years from now.
For those listening who are not familiar with Christians United for Israel, can you tell me a little bit more about the organization and why they care about Israel?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we are a grassroots organization that really functions also as like a network of Christian pastors and Christian community leaders of all ages, all denominations, people who have said, you know what, I'm going to put aside our denominational differences. I'm going to put aside our political differences. We're all Christians and we understand that it's important to stand with Israel and the Jewish people. People always want to know, why? Okay, you're telling me that millions of Christians stand with Israel, millions of Christians care about the Jewish people. Isn't that random? Isn't that just not what you would expect, right? Considering the history of, some very harsh, dark moments in Jewish-Christian relations. But these Christians at Christians United for Israel, we really understand that Judaism is the context that the Christian faith was birthed into. And we understand that the Bible, yes, it is the word of God. And yes, it is beautiful promises written to us that we believe that God wrote for us. But it's also a very detailed historic account of the Jewish people, of their formation, of their religion, their politics, and their longing for their own country, right? They're longing for their own country in the land of Israel. And we believe that that longing, it didn't go away or it didn't become less valid when they stopped writing books of the Bible. By the way, those books were written by Jews, right? So just understanding, okay, this is a very special tradition that the Jewish people have actually, passed to us, the tradition of, reading scripture that comes from the Jewish people. This is a very beautiful story that didn't end when they stopped writing books of the Bible. It's actually very beautiful that this has continued on into 2025.
So I want to talk about Israel for a second, because if I may add, I think the land of Israel is important to Christians because it has some of the holy places for Christianity as much as it does for Judaism. And my whole life, I have only visited Israel through the paradigm of a Jewish person. I've been to Israel many times. I've lived in Israel 2 summers when I was a kid growing up. Most of the trips that I've gone on always included some kind of Jewish program, be it Alexander Moss High School in Israel, be it Birthright. There's only been one time in my life that I went and saw non-Jewish sites. It was the last time that I went to Israel. It must have been like 2017. And the reason we ended up seeing all of these non-Jewish sites is because I have an aunt who somehow converted to Russian Orthodoxy at some point and considers herself Russian Orthodox, even though she's hella Jew, okay? She's Jewish. And she had a curiosity to go visit not only the Russian Orthodox landmarks, but also just the Christian landmarks in general. And so for the first time in my adult life, I went to a city called Capernaum, where Jesus supposedly walked on water and was a place where he resided for many years and studied, and he had his followers there as well. And it's these like ruins at this point that you can visit, and you can see the lake as well, or the Sea of Galilee. And they have this one portion of the archaeological sites, the remains, where there are these columns. And it is said that the columns have a very strong energy. You can take a penny and tap it on the column and it echoes a certain way. And it's strange because the columns are made out of stone, so it technically shouldn't echo at all. But for some reason, when you tap a penny or anything metal on these columns, there's like some resonant sound, and they apparently couldn't figure out how it was built because it theoretically should not be able to make any kind of sound. Our tour guide was saying how like people feel really strong vibes, out here in the columns. And there's a really strong energy here that some people can't withstand. And I've never experienced something like this, but my aunt literally fell ill at the columns. Like she was lightheaded. She was all woozy, like, woo, she was not feeling well at the columns. But I think it was placebo because our tour guide did prime us to be like, it has strong energy, that people don't feel well there sometimes. So I don't know. Still remains a mystery. Long story short, in addition to Capernaum, for the first time, even though I have been to Israel a total of 10 times, for the first time, I went to see the Christian Quarter at the Western Wall. And I also visited the place where there is that in the church, in the Christian Quarter at the Western Wall, there is apparently, you can keep me honest here, a place where there is a fire that lights on its own, and it's a miracle, and people don't know how it occurs.
I have never heard this before.
Okay. Well, I think you might know about this, but there is also a part in the church where you can go to the attic or something, and there's a very long line of people. There's a portion, a little piece of wood that is supposedly the piece of the cross that Jesus was crucified on. And this little piece of wood is still preserved, and you can go see it. And it's always a ton of people trying to go see this cross.
Yeah. It's so interesting because in Christianity, there are different denominations and different traditions. And in those traditions, people react differently to certain sites in Israel. It's so fascinating. Something I've noticed in the, 13 years that I've been doing this is that depending on how close your traditions are to Catholicism and to the more Orthodox denominations, that can really change what you remember about Israel and the places that you'll be taken on these trips and what will even stand out to you. Because I know like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, so there are 2 sites where Jesus could have been buried and resurrected. And the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is very likely, like archaeologically speaking and historically speaking, very likely to be where Jesus was crucified and where he was buried. Traditionally speaking, the Catholic Church and the more Orthodox denominations, that's where they recognize, and they have a big church built on top of it, right?
So that's where it is, right? By the Western Wall.
Yeah. So that makes a ton of sense. And more evangelical, like the less Orthodox you are, the less you tend to connect with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And the more you connect with the Garden Tomb, which is the other, possible site, which like archaeologically and historically speaking, I'm not sure that is actually the site. I think more likely that it's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. But even knowing that, I connect more being at the Garden Tomb, because it's just like the difference is in how we make something sacred and how we view something that's sacred. So something I appreciate about Catholicism and the more Orthodox denominations is that if something is holy to them, they want to make sure to mark the sacred, right? They want to make sure that they consecrate it by building a church on top of it, or that they have all this beautiful artwork and that they set it up so that everyone can see it. And the less Orthodox denominations, we're like, oh, it's so beautiful. I don't want to add anything to it. And it's so beautiful. I just want to, enjoy it for what it is. And I don't want anything that was made with human hands to be surrounding it. So you'll see when you take people to Israel, the more like Orthodox people, they'll go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and they'll just, shake and weep, like this archaeological site in Capernaum made me feel so, I felt dizzy. And someone from a more evangelical background, we might walk around and we're like, nice paintings, we're like, oh, this is nice. But at the Garden Tomb, or even at the Western Wall or the Sea of Galilee, like sites that typically are more like nature surrounded, more like a more natural setting, there everyone is like crying and everyone's, I feel so connected to my faith here. And it's interesting that you're kind of touching on that, the differences and how Christians, we can all agree that the Holy Land is special to us. But even in us being united as Christians, that could look like completely different sites in different settings.
That's a really good point that I didn't think about. You're right. There are so many differences of opinion and denominations in Christianity. Now, tell me, did you grow up in Missouri?
Yes, I grew up here.
So you mentioned that there's not a lot of Jewish life in Missouri, which I can understand. Can you tell me how you first learned about the Jewish community and about Zionism?
I never even met a Jewish person until I went to college, until I was 19 years old. And it's funny to say that because I grew up in church. I grew up in a Christian home, learning about Jewish people all my life, but it never, the dots never connected for me. I saw Prince of Egypt in theaters like when it first came out, and I was like, this is awesome. And my dad growing up loved watching the movie The 10 Commandments, like that old movie. He would say, I don't understand why this movie comes on every year for Easter. Now I know it wasn't coming on for Easter, it was coming on for Passover. But, I knew I was learning about the Jewish people and learning about Judaism and really had no idea. And flash forward to I'm a senior in high school, figuring out what my next chapter of life should be. And I also grew up in a church that taught us that it was important to pray for Israel and that it was important to stand with the Jewish people against anti-Semitism. But I didn't really know what that meant because the only context I had for Israel and the Jewish people was the 10 Commandments and Prince of Egypt. So when someone says, pray for Israel, stand with the Jewish people, I'm thinking, yeah, Pharaoh, why won't you, let these people go? And I'm picturing the children of Israel wandering the desert in Bible costumes, not Tel Aviv, not Jerusalem, not Haifa, not Jaffa, like not real Israel, right? So flash forward to my senior year of high school, I'm figuring out like what I want to do next. And my pastor was like, hey, you should get involved with Christians United for Israel's college program, CUFI, on campus. Just purely because I knew it was the right thing to do. I said, okay, I'll get involved, even though I didn't really understand what I was talking about or really what I was signing myself up for. But I started college and started hearing people say all these horrible things about Israel, and Israel bombs buildings of women and children just for fun. I actually had a professor say that. And I was like, what? That is not what I grew up hearing about Israel. And I was so caught off guard and so bewildered by hearing the things people were saying about Israel. So I went on this journey of trying to understand, okay, like what is actually going on in modern day Israel? And what does it have to do with me, a nice Christian girl from Columbia, Missouri, who had never met a Jewish person before in my life at that point? I realized that, the things that I shared with you earlier, that the story of Israel didn't end when they stopped writing books of the Bible, that the people of Israel live, and the same challenges, the same hatred that they faced during the life of Moses, during the life of Esther, during the life of any Jewish hero in the Bible, the hatred that they faced, it didn't go away either. And we have an obligation to fight that same hatred today. And we have an opportunity to be a part of Israel's story.
It's so interesting to hear all these stories over the course of doing this podcast of people saying, like, I went to college and my professor said this, and then insert wildly anti-Semitic thing. That has never happened to me. And I feel like I'm the best person for it to happen to because I will always say something back.
Yes.
And I'm like, in all my time, how has this never happened to me? I'm never one of those people that's in an environment where it happens. But in another sense, I'm very grateful because it's traumatizing. It's jarring. It's a very jarring experience. Like, I can't imagine. There is a chance there was a Jewish student there in class with you who wanted to fall through the floor when they heard that.
Right.
Because it's just so crazy. It's vile to hear something like that. I'm interested to know, have you ever witnessed anti-Semitism and responded to it?
Gosh, I would love to say no, but unfortunately, in the line of work that I'm in, I have seen so much anti-Semitism, especially most of my career, I've worked with college students. For most of my career, I worked specifically helping Jewish college students advocate for themselves when there was egregious anti-Semitism on their campus. And I've seen, just really horrible things happen. I mean, one situation, I had a student that I worked with. She had a roommate who was horribly anti-Semitic and didn't really know it until the roommate overheard her talking on the phone to someone about Israel and talking on the phone about being Jewish. And then, like, after that phone call was over, just an explosion, a huge confrontation between this girl and her roommate. And you can't have enough talking points or strategies or all the advocacy training in the world can't prepare you for someone in your own home being so against you, someone in your own home having such hatred against you. That was the situation that stuck with me the most, because your home is supposed to be where you feel safe. It's supposed to be where you find peace, a sanctuary for you. These college students, they don't go off to college because they want to fight for their right to exist on campus and fight for the existence of their homeland. They're going to learn. To ask them to do both at the same time, it's horrible. And for even a student's dorm room to not be safe, it's really disgusting and it's not acceptable.
I want to add to that and bring up my brother, who I bring up in like every single episode because I am obsessed with him. My brother is at the University of Minnesota, and I realized this only now that I've heard you say it, that him and I both went to the University of Minnesota. And when I was a student, I was very involved in Jewish life, but I thought it was just a me thing. You know what I mean? Like that I sought those opportunities out, that I was drawn to it. That's how I wanted to be involved. And still I am, right? So it could be a personality thing. But my brother is also very involved. And I'm starting to realize that it's not a product of preference. It's just that when you're a Jewish student on an ultra liberal campus and you refuse to conform to feeling like you have to hide or to feeling like you have to be acceptable, your whole college experience is now twisted into the paradigm of being constantly aware that you're Jewish and being constantly in a position where you're like, I can tell I don't belong here and I don't care. I choose it anyway. And I am starting to come to the conclusion that's the reality for our college students and many campuses anyway, is that those students who refuse to be woke or refuse to act like Israel's not important to them, their whole college experience then is twisted on its head where they can no longer focus on education. They now have to be aware in every moment that I'm Jewish, I care about Israel, but this place doesn't get me, and it never will.
Right. I think there's something to that, right? You don't see other minority groups having to prove hatred against them like you do the Jewish community, especially on college campuses. I'll talk to college students and ask them, what's your experience like at your school? And they'll say, we have our issues with anti-Semitism, but it's not Columbia. It's not Harvard where, this happened. And, I tell them, do you know that's actually such a low bar? I get what you're saying. I'm glad I'm glad that no one is, blocking you from entering certain buildings. I'm glad that there isn't open support for terrorism at your school, but that's actually such a low bar. And I would love for the conversation around anti-Semitism in our country, but especially on college campuses, I would love for the bar to be raised a bit. And I would love for college students to just feel like they can go Jewish, Christian, any Zionist student. I would love for them to just go to school and be able to be a part of what they're interested in, because it's the bare minimum. It's the accepted standard that supporting terrorism on college campuses is wrong, or that making Jewish students feel uncomfortable on campus is wrong. That should be the bare minimum, and it's such a low bar.
You mentioned that other minority groups don't have to work so hard to prove that they're being hated. I actually think that's not the dynamic for the Jews. I think it's a little bit different. It's not that Jews have to prove that they're hated. It's that Jews have to prove that the hate against them is wrong. Because now the narrative is, well, we hate you for a reason. We hate you for a good reason because you're Zionists and you do ethnic cleansing and genocide. Like, certainly that type of hate is defensible because you are rodents. You control the media. You're horrible people that deserve to be destroyed. And it just so happens that you're Jews, but you could be anything and we'd still hate you because what you're doing is wrong. So it's not just are Jews hated? Because the answer is categorically yes. Nobody disputes that. It's now having to say it's not okay to be hated. We're not hated fairly. And that is much harder to fight.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and October 7th really exposed that, right? October 7th, Israel had not even retaliated yet. The whole war and the casualties in Gaza hadn't happened yet. And people were already protesting. And I'm like, what are you protesting? Israel hasn't even retaliated yet. Israel was just attacked, freshly attacked. I think you're right. I think that anti-Semitism, I think it has become an acceptable form of bigotry. And I think that the Jewish people, they are asked to withstand a higher threshold of hatred and pain before something is actually done about it. We have seen that on college campuses, but I think October 7th really exposed that. You're right.
And before we pivot to something I'd like to get your advice on, I want to say a message to my Jewish listeners. I think about this a lot. I think about our students on college campuses that feel uncomfortable in their own skin every day, to the point that some students feel uncomfortable in their own dorm rooms, right? Because they have non-Jewish roommates that were randomly assigned to them that they didn't get to pick, who don't support them. And I think about our hostages who, while in captivity, refuse to not keep Shabbat, refuse to not commit to their faith, even if it puts their life at risk. And if you're Jewish and you're listening to this, And you're one of those people that's scared to wear your Magen David, scared to tell people that you're Jewish, scared to look visibly Jewish. If you're people that I know personally that have taken your mezuzahs down from your apartment door because you're scared that somebody will see that you're a Jewish home, I want to challenge you to step up, because people who are in a lot more vulnerable positions are not willing to renounce their Judaism and are not willing to hide that they're Jewish because it's a matter of principle. And I hope that my Jewish peers can also take a principle stance, because you may think that by hiding your Star of David or taking down your mezuzah, that you're protecting yourself. And in the short term, you may, perhaps, that is true. But in the long term, you're harming the collective Jewish people, because you're taking the stance, you're setting the precedent that there is something worth hiding. There is something that deserves to be hidden, that there's something wrong. And that is exactly why those people on campuses feel it's okay to hate us, feel there is a justification for hating Jews, because we don't want to give them reason or evidence that our own Jewish people are willing to hide themselves out of shame. That's my rant. That's my TED Talk. Okay, moving on. Here's what I want your advice on. Talk to me about how you're building bridges with non-Jews and what we Jewish people can do to help other non-Jews understand that Israel is not a bad place, that Jewish people want peace, that we choose life over death, and all the talking points that you're very familiar with.
Yeah. When it comes to building bridges between communities, something I'm asked all the time is, okay, well, like, I know that these people, they're very conservative Christians, that these people, they're Jewish, or they're, more left-leaning, they're more progressive. How can we possibly sit down and talk about Israel? Won't these other issues and topics get in the way when, let's be honest, we're living through a very polarizing time. I think we have been for the last 10 years living through very polarizing times, right? And, is that possible? And I think the answer is absolutely yes, it is possible. We live in a world where, can I tell you, like, not everyone has the same opinions. It doesn't matter, what you're talking about. If it's political or, should chocolate hummus be a thing? I think not. But there are some people who say yes. I don't want to belittle how big some of the problems our society is facing, right? But at the same time, if we can't have a conversation with someone who comes from a different culture from us, who comes from a different background from us, if we can't do that for the things that are important to us, can you set those other topics aside for 1 hour? Can you set it aside for 1 hour for you to have a conversation with somebody else about something that is important to you that would also be important to them, right? And I know that's easier said than done, but if we want Israel to be a topic that everyone connects to and that everyone can see something for themselves in and something that's special to them, we've got to put our differences aside can you do it for 1 hour? Can you give me 1 hour to just focus on building bridges with another community? And by the way, I say this to Christian communities. I say this to Jewish leaders all the time. No, we all need to, just for a measured moment, measured time, can you just put aside these other things and break bread with someone else, or, shake hands with someone else and find some way to connect them to Israel or share Israel's story with them and connect, why anti-Semitism is a problem. Just setting those other things aside for a moment to focus on this very important issue that I think a lot of people can connect to, can see that it's important, but we have to just make that concerted effort for that 1 hour. I also like to remind people to be mindful of the language that they use. Something that the pro-Palestine movement does really well that we joke about in the pro-Israel movement is they have all these fun, catchy, slogans, like from the river to the sea, or, they just quickly say, free Palestine. And something I've been thinking about since the war started is, are those phrases, are they catchy, or are they just in English and everyone can understand them, here in the United States? Most of our sayings, phrases in the pro-Israel movement are in Hebrew, we would say, Am Israel Chai. That's the equivalent to, I don't think there's a moral equivalency, just making that clear. But in terms of, catchphrases of the two movements, I think that would be our equivalent. And if someone was like walking past a crowd and anywhere in America, chanting that, they would have no idea what is going on. And so many times I've been in either like on an Israel trip or like at a conference or like at an educational event where there were so many people from beyond the Jewish community in the room, and it was a prime opportunity for them to learn. And then all these phrases like tikkun olam, Shabbat, kosher, which I think most people would know, what being kosher is or not, but you would be surprised how many people have no idea, like all of these phrases related to Judaism that are also in Hebrew, that if you are just coming in off the street, you have no idea what's going on, right? So just keeping in mind, asking yourself, okay, if I use these like niche phrases, it's okay to educate on them, right? Because you want to make sure that people know what you're talking about. I'm not saying don't talk about Judaism. I'm not saying, censor yourself or change your beliefs for allies. No, allies won't ask you to change yourself. Allies won't ask you to hide who you are. But remember to do a little educating, because they won't know what you're talking about if you don't tell them.
It has to be accessible. I think you bring up an excellent point. This is very important. And that's the whole PR crisis that Israel has, just period, about anything, not even just like Jewish life, about politics, about the whole thing. People don't understand Israel and how Israeli society operates. In your time of doing this work, is there anyone whose mind you've changed about something regarding this?
Honestly, it's hard to think of just one person whose mind has changed through this work. There have been many students, many college students that I've taken to Israel who aren't Jewish, who had only heard negative things about Israel before visiting. And visiting Israel, their eyes are opened. Or people who felt like they had generally positive feelings towards Israel, but they didn't want to be involved in politics or anything controversial. And so they didn't want to really become activists who now are activists. There are Jewish students even that I've worked with who have said, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to fight. I just want to, live my life and be anonymous, which is understandable. And I, don't criticize anyone who just wants to exist and not be stressed out and not be in the confrontation. But I've worked with Jewish students who have started out that way, and now they're the fiercest advocates for themselves and just champions for their community. I think it's always worth taking a risk on someone. I think it's always worth, trying to challenge someone to take it a step further. But also, the truth of Israel really speaks for itself, and you have to be either not wanting to see the truth about Israel, or you have to just really have a deep-seated hatred for the Jewish people to not see the truth about Israel. And I've been so blessed to be able to be a part of people's story where they get to be a part of what's happening in Israel and telling the truth about Israel and the Jewish people.
This is amazing. Is there any way in which your perception of Jewish people has changed over the years?
So I wouldn't say my perception of the Jewish people has changed, but my relationship to the community has really changed and grown over the years. And so has my relationship to Israel. I mean, I started out being like, I actually don't even know a Jewish person, right? To, eventually going to grad school at Tel Aviv University and having 2 Jewish roommates. And my whole life was living in the Jewish state. And from there, working in Israel advocacy, and I work for Christians United for Israel now, but most of my career, I worked at a mostly Jewish pro-Israel nonprofit, working with mostly Jewish students. And so I really became immersed in the Jewish community in that role. And so now with that understanding of the Jewish community and how different Jewish community organizations work, I'm able to help Christians understand and better navigate their own bridge building with the Jewish community, and able to help people navigate, okay, how do I have a conversation with this person? How do I, navigate this? Yeah, so I wouldn't say my perspective so much on the Jewish people has changed, but my feeling of connection to the Jewish community and my own comfort level and just the personal investment I feel and seeing the Jewish community be celebrated, that has changed and grown so much over the years.
Okay, awesome. Is there something in Jewish culture or history that deeply resonates with you?
So when I was in grad school in Israel, I would see Orthodox people when it was time for them to do their prayers at, certain times. It doesn't matter if they're on the plane. It doesn't matter if they're on the bus. It doesn't matter where they are. They just whip out their little prayer book and they just do their thing right where they are. And they don't do it in a way that's showy, or they're not like drawing attention to themselves. It's just like this kind of quiet devotion to the word of God and quiet devotion to their religion. And so when I came back to the States and my life started just getting busy in my career, I've had to travel so much, and I'm always like on a plane or at the airport or in an Uber or like at a hotel or just, wherever. And I've realized, there's really no excuse for me to not have that same quiet devotion to my own faith. And so in the same spirit and the same attitude to what I witnessed Orthodox Jews practicing their Judaism, I practice my Christianity. Okay, I don't have to draw attention to myself if I want to read the Bible in a public place, just because that's the only place that I have time to do it, right? If I'm starting my day on a plane, I can do this on a plane. I can do this in an airport or, wherever I am. I also love the tradition of having a mezuzah on your door. Now I have a mezuzah on my front door and on my bedroom door, because I just love the idea that you're keeping, scripture, keeping the word of God first place in your home and acknowledging it when you enter a room and letting it protect you. I love that idea. And I find it so beautiful. So, I could go on, but those are the two things that just really connect with me and that I've practiced in my own life.
That is so cool. Thank you for putting up a mezuzah. For all the people that are too scared or took down theirs, you are helping the Jewish people by normalizing being Jewish or supporting Jewish people and how you go about life.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
As part of this Go You Will Enjoy series, every guest gets to ask me, a Jew, a question. It can be as simple or deep and meaningful as you would like. Do you have any question for me? I'm a Hebrew school teacher, so you can go advanced mode on me.
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think for it like in advance. Okay, what do you want Christians to know about being Jewish?
That is in fact a deep question. Something that I wrestle with, you can keep me honest here, is the importance of Jesus Christ to the Jews versus Christians. And I want for those Christians who don't know, many do know, to know how Jews feel about Jesus. I talked about this on another episode with a different guest, but the way that I was taught about the life of Jesus is that he was a regular Jewish person that was born into the earth just like everybody else. I know that Christianity believes otherwise, that even before Jesus was born, that it was already predestined that he be a special person to mankind. Right. That's not what Jews believe.
Right.
We just think that he was a regular dude that was born and decided to make it his life's mission to make the world a better place. And he became a prophet and became very, very popular during the times of the Roman Empire. And back then, the Jews were kind of splitting up into 4 different sects: the Sadducees, Essenes, Pharisee, and Zealot Jews, right? And so Jesus, a Pharisee Jew, which was one of the leading 2 sects of Jews at the time, he became very, very popular, but he was very progressive in his thinking. And so the rabbis back then, they didn't like some of what Jesus taught because they felt that it was reinventing how Judaism ought to be practiced. And my take on it is the Jews didn't kill Jesus. The Roman Empire came for Jesus because, as influential as Jesus was in the Jewish community, we are taught that Jesus was also kind of an instigator within the Roman Empire. He intimidated the Roman Empire with his large following and his progressive ideas. And so the Romans had an incentive to take him out. Just like we saw, any assassination happen to any influential person, even in modern history. And my understanding is that when the Romans came for Jesus, it's not that the Jews killed him. It's just that they didn't go out of their way to really save him. That's what I understood. But you can keep me honest on that.
Yeah, I also agree with you. The Jews did not kill Jesus. So on my very first trip to Israel, I was a college student, and one of the other students on the trip asked our tour guide, his name was Avi, classic tour guide name. He said, Avi, what do the Jews believe about something else? And Avi said, okay, well, first of all, what you have to understand is there's no the Jews. Okay, the Jewish people have all these different perspectives. The Jewish people are not a monolith. So there's no, the Jews believe X, Y, Z, there are different traditions. There are different levels of observance. The Jewish people, like any group, they're not all the same, right? And we understand that about Christianity, right? So first of all, there's no the Jews killed Jesus, because there's no, the Jews that could do anything together, right? And no other group do we make that assumption, right? If a Christian individual does something wrong, or you hear that a famous Christian pastor did something wrong, we Christians know that wasn't all Christians. That wasn't me. I'm still going to go to church on Sunday, even though that happened. We have to recognize that the Jewish people are the same. The Jews did not kill Jesus, right? From our traditions, we do see that some of the leaders of the Pharisees conspired with the Roman soldiers to have Jesus arrested and did encourage Jesus to be crucified. At the same time, that's not the Jews, right? That is not every single Jew that was alive at the time. That isn't even every single Jew in Jerusalem. That's, some individuals doing something negative, but also the whole point of Christianity is that Jesus was crucified. That's what we believe. So we see that as a sad occurrence, that something bad that happened to Jesus, but it was good because we believe it was for our benefit. So it's very twisted and so wrong on so many levels for a Christian to say, oh, the Jews killed Jesus. And I get those comments on my social media. People will say, oh, you like the Jews? Don't you know who killed Jesus? And I'm like, yeah, Roman soldiers. And also, I believe as a Christian that Jesus died for my benefit. If I don't believe that, I'm not a Christian. That's the whole point. It's very stupid that's one of the most stupid excuses for anti-Semitism, especially from Christians. I can't stand it.
I think we basically netted out on the same thing there. I just came about it in a less articulate way, and I was nervous because I don't want to say anything, that would offend a Christian or something. I don't want to say anything to ostracize anybody. But that's what I would want Christians to know. I want Christians to understand the paradigm through which we view Jesus Christ. I don't think a lot of Christians who are not as immersed in this world realize that.
Right.
But I think that this approach is consistent for Jews on anything that's New Testament, right? The Jews have always been we've got the Torah, we've got our Talmud and Midrash, and that's about it. Everyone else can have different opinions. Oh, we don't care.
Right. Yeah, I think it's interesting for Christians to understand Judaism isn't trying to expand. We're just staying in our lane. We've got enough problems. We're just, trying to maintain what we have is kind of how I understand Judaism. And Christianity and Islam and other religions aren't really like that. It's an interesting difference, and it's hard for a lot of Christians to wrap their minds around, I think.
It's also partially because Judaism predates the concept of modern religion, which can be irrespective of ethnicity, whereas Judaism is directly tied to ethnicity because it's an ethno-religion. Right. So I feel like any person from another religion that's not Judaism struggles with that, because I am not aware of another ethno-religion that's as popularized as Judaism. Maybe there's a couple hundred people somewhere. I don't know.
No, you're so right. That's a question I get asked sometimes. People will say, well, Judaism, it isn't a race. Isn't it a religion? Isn't it this? Isn't it that? And I tell them, you're having a hard time understanding this because the Jewish identity is from a different time. It's from a different era, right? It's not from America 2025. It's from the Babylonians. It's from the Philistines. It's from, all of these people groups. To what you said, you're having a hard time thinking of other, groups that have a similar ethno-religious approach. And it's because those other ethno-religions don't exist anymore. Like they're extinct, but the Jewish people live, and that's incredibly special. And that's all the more reason why we need to work so hard to protect this and to keep it special, to keep it strong.
Thanks so much for doing this, Destiny. Tell me, how can people connect with you on social media and learn more about your work?
Yeah, so on social media, I am Destiny the Wonderful in all humility, as I like to say. And then also Christians United for Israel has a wonderful Instagram account, wonderful YouTube channel, TikTok. CUFI on Campus is also our college program's Instagram account. CUFI High School, a great Instagram account. And I'd love to, connect with everyone on social media.
Amazing. It has been delightful to speak with you today. Thank you very much for educating me, and I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Me too. I really did too.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please go ahead and rate us 5 stars. Be the first to hear our episodes by subscribing to People Jew Want to Know wherever you get your podcasts. And for exclusive content, follow us on Instagram at People Jew Want to Know.